Welcome. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Wherever you are, whether you're in Jamaica or anywhere you are in the world, just want to welcome you to our very first Women's Electric Vehicle Forum. And of course, it's entitled She's in Charge. Now, this is the very first forum that we're hosting, and it is being done by the JPS Foundation in collaboration with the Inter American Development Bank. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that collaboration in a little while. But at this point in time, I'd want to introduce you to some of our very special guests. It's a very great afternoon for us. We are absolutely thrilled to be here, and we know that you're looking forward to a very fantastic evening filled with loads of information as the females take it and we go in charge. Now, let's look at some of our guests who we have in the house with us. I want to first introduce Eleanor Jones, and she's the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Environmental Solutions. We also have with us Jacqueline Stewart Leckler, and she's the Director at Stewart's Auto Sales. And then we also have Winsome Callum, who is over there waving to us. Winsome is the JPS Director of Corporate Communication and also she's the chairman of the JPS Foundation. We also have with us our moderator for the roundtable discussion that will take place later on in this. That's Dion Nugent, and she's the JPS Business Development Unit. She's the director for the JPS Business Development Unit, and she's also one of our very own female engineers. Also, we have Aradhana Galot. Let me get that correct. Aradhana Galot, and she's a program associate at the Rocky Mountain Institute. We also have with us Ethne Miller Simpson, president of the Women's Entrepreneurs Network of the Caribbean. And we also have Zara Oliphant. She's the acting director for corporate planning and performance management in the Ministry of Science, Energy, and Technology. And then we have, of course, our keynote speaker. And I'm looking at her, looking just like she did when she left here a few years ago. Kelly Tomlin, and at this point in time, she's the president and CEO of El Paso Electric, and she's also the former president and CEO of JPS. At this point in time, I want you to just give a nice round of applause wherever you are and welcome all our guests, all those persons we'll be hearing from. Now, as I told you before, I want to give you a little bit about the collaboration that we're having with the Inter-American Development Bank. And so to do that, I'm going to call on Winsome Callum to come and join us and talk to us about, and let me get this correct, the e-mobility ecosystem project. Please give Winsome Callum a welcome.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's really very exciting. It's an exciting time for consumers, for the energy sector, and also for the automobile industry. We're seeing unprecedented disruption in the global auto industry. More and more persons are actually choosing the more efficient and environmentally friendly EVs over the regular internal combustion engine vehicles. According to one report, in the first half of 2021, there was a 160% increase in the number of EVs sold compared to the same time last year. Exciting times, right? And right here in Jamaica, there's a growing interest in EVs. The government is far advanced in establishing the policy framework, and both private and public sector bodies are preparing for the inevitable growth in electric mobility in Jamaica. For its part, Jamaica's energy company, JPS, has rolled out a set of EV charging stations. We already have one operational in St. Anne, and before the end of this month, yes, this month, we'll have at least 3 others operational in St. James, in Portland, and in St. Andrew. The IDB, that's the Inter-American Development Bank, is also playing a very important role in the expansion of electric mobility in Jamaica. As part of its support for EVs, the IDB is collaborating with several public and private sector entities to implement several interrelated EV projects. There's several projects going on, but I want to talk about one. One of the key projects that's being implemented by the IDB Lab is the Building a Sustainable Electric Mobility Ecosystem for Inclusion and Access. That's a mouthful, right? But we just call it the E-Mobility Ecosystem Project. And the JPS Foundation was selected as the executing agency for this project, which is jointly funded by the IDB Lab and JPS. The E-Mobility Ecosystem Project has three main components. The first component is public awareness and market sensitization. Today's forum, the Women's EV Forum, is one of several initiatives being implemented to build awareness around EVs. The aim is to provide information around the benefits of EVs, cost savings, supporting infrastructure and standards, as well as safety requirements and practices for charging your EVs. While we're working with multiple stakeholder groups, almost everybody, we recognize that a significant percentage of women are the main decision makers when it comes to purchasing vehicles. So this project not only recognizes that women are maybe the main decision makers, but women also are leading change. Women are looking at doing things differently. So we are going to be targeting women, especially in our communication outreach. We'll be partnering with gender-focused organizations to target women entrepreneurs in particular, and to develop partnerships with climate change organizations, and just to influence our conversation around change, not just in the EV sector, but generally. How is the transportation sector impacting the environment? As part of the project, earlier this year, we engaged a team of experts to carry out a comprehensive market research to get some insights into the attitudes of key stakeholders and the general public to electric mobility. Very interesting. Coming out of that, 82% of the persons who were surveyed, they agreed that EVs will be part of Jamaica's future. However, there were some concerns, and that's what we will be addressing in our market sensitization and public awareness campaign. The second component of the ecosystem project is it focuses on innovative finance and technology. Now, this is where the excitement is. The objective of this component is to support the development of innovative financing models that put EVs within the reach of the regular Jamaican. We'll also be supporting women in, well, we mentioned women in entrepreneurship, but we're also looking at creating employment opportunities for young people as well as other stakeholder groups. This includes the establishment of an electric mobility fund that can serve as a source of concessionary funding, concessionary financing, and it will support the other local financial institutions who are interested in offering green financial products. The ecosystem project, e-mobility ecosystem project, will also drive the development of new business models by leveraging emerging technology and complementary services in the whole ecosystem. We have some really, really exciting initiatives in this component of the project. They include an innovation challenge for entrepreneurs and innovators. It includes university students. We'll be creating internship opportunities for university students. And we'll also be developing a logistics digital solution to support access to EV charging networks. The final component, that's technical capacity building and training, because we want this thing to be sustainable, right? So this component will focus on developing technical capacities in our local training institutions to enable them to meet the demands for new skills. Remember, this is a new emerging sector. We don't already have mechanics trained here. We don't already have first responders. So we're focusing on training persons so that when the EVs start rolling in, we'll be ready. The ecosystem will be ready. So we're working with HeartTrust, NSTA, and consultants with expertise in this area to identify and adapt certificate programs in EVs. These will cover safety standards and technical skills required for firefighters, roadside assistance personnel, first responders in general. By the end of this project, 400 persons. 400 persons would have been trained as part of this e-mobility ecosystem. And we'll also be training trainers. A cadre of trainers will be in place to keep this, to ensure that this is sustainable, because EVs are here to stay. As you can see, there's a lot happening in electric mobility, a lot. And we are really, really excited. And you've only heard of in this entire network of complementary projects. So stay tuned. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. We have an exciting ride ahead of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Winsome. I'm having the feeling that I should get me an electric vehicle already. Sounds like things are exciting. You already have one, Audrey? You need one. We both need one. All right, thank you so much for giving us insight into what's going on with the IADB. And I'm really looking forward to it, because it seems as if things are going to be really up and bouncing very soon. As she says, get ready for the ride. All right, now just about all of us have maybe, an internal combustion vehicle, which is really the one that we are all used to, the regular cars that we drive every day. But this forum is really about electric vehicles. So some persons might be wondering, so what's the difference really? What's the difference between an EV and an internal combustion engine? That's ICE for short, I think. Well, we're going to show you a video that's going to give you some insight into what that is all about, to clarify and just clear the fog that's in your brain just before we get the discussion going. So at this point in time, I want you to just take a moment to just watch this video and see what's happening.
So an internal combustion engine, similar to the engine that we have at home or that we have all around us. An internal combustion engine is a type of vehicle that you go to, let's say, a service station, and you fill it up with gasoline or diesel oil, because obviously we don't have gasoline or diesel oil at home. So these fuels, you're able to put them into your car and they fire up your engine turns, and that's how you turn your wheel, and you press your accelerator. An electric vehicle, well, it uses electricity and it stores that electricity in its battery, just like you have a battery in your phone. It stores that electricity and it uses that electricity to drive motors. Motors similar to the motors you'd have in your fan at home or your hairdryer. And that motor turns and it turns your wheels. When you press that accelerator, the motor turns and it turns your wheel in an electric vehicle. So they provide the same function, but they're different. On the electric vehicle hood, depending on the car, sometimes you may not see anything other than a storage space. For some vehicles, when you open the hood, you will see your power control modules. And you'll see various electrical components, but you won't see a radiator anymore. There's no engine to see. So it's basically just a big power control module that's sitting there, and underneath your seats quite often you'll find that's where the batteries are kept. And of course the motors, they're kept by the wheels. When you look under the hood of an internal combustion engine, you'll see the radiator at the front, you see the engine, your transmission, your small battery, your different water bottles, all these different components. In fact, an internal combustion engine in total has over 1,000 parts, whilst an electric vehicle has just over 100 parts. So it's a lot more simpler in terms of the amount of components it takes to put it all together. An electric vehicle, you have to charge it. So for an internal combustion engine, we have to go to a service station because we don't have gasoline at home. But guess what? The majority of us have electricity at home. So you have your own gas station at home. So every evening or every other evening as you see fit, depending on how much you drive daily, you'll charge up your vehicle. So all vehicles come equipped with a charger, and your charger will have a plug similar to this one. They have different standards, but for the purpose of the explanation, I'll use this standard, this plug. And it's simply retracting it from the charger, opening that little flip in the front of your vehicle or to the side of your vehicle, that small little hood, where you would normally you would put in your gas. It could be on the side, or it can be in the front, or it can be in the back. You simply just plug this in, and that's it, your vehicle will start charging. You have different levels of charger, yes, and what the different levels mean is that you're able to deliver more power faster. So for most of our daily use, the charger that comes with the car is quite adequate. We'll be driving on average 40 kilometers a day. Let's say you're driving from Kingston to Portmore back and forth. So you find 2 to 4 hours on your charger at home is good enough. If somebody invests in a slightly larger charger like this one, which is called a level 2, it's able to deliver a lot more power. So you could always be doing 2 hours every other day, as you see fit, depending on how much you drive every day. So level 3 chargers are much bigger. They deliver a lot more power. You don't find those at home. Those you find along the highway. That's when you're making that long commute out to the countryside or the beach and you're far away from home and you need to refill your battery or bring it up to a high enough level to get to where you want to go or to go back home. So a level 3 charger delivers a lot more power to your vehicle in a shorter space of time. You'll hear a lot spoken about the cost of electric vehicles. That's the one hurdle that the industry is working to get over, which is that the initial cost for an electric vehicle is still more than an internal combustion engine vehicle, your regular vehicle. But what we do know now is that the cost to operate an electric vehicle is far less, 50–40% less than what it costs to operate an internal combustion engine vehicle, your regular vehicle. So you find, whilst you're using electricity, the cost of that energy is actually cheaper than using gasoline, having to do maintenance on your vehicle ever so often. It's a lot less cheaper to operate that vehicle. So you're finding persons who are already realizing if they had, let's say, based on the cost of an electric vehicle, what they would have bought in a regular vehicle is almost the same cost. You're finding persons have realized they're cheap parity. So you find when you make that transition, for example, when you have a sporty type vehicle or a sporting vehicle, you're paying almost the same amount of money to purchase your electric vehicle, but the cost to operate is half of what you would have paid operating your regular internal combustion engine vehicle. So persons are easily now making that transition to electric vehicles already in these early days.
Thank you so much for that, Richard. I'm sure that we're now a little bit clearer on electric vehicles. What I remember from that presentation, it gives you extra trunk space. Yeah, you get trunk space in the front. It's simpler in terms of all the things that you see in there. It has less parts. And you can just plug it in, plug and go. As his shirt said, charge and go. Hey, who doesn't want to charge and go? Charge and go. I'm having charge and go people over here, and I want to charge and go. So we're going to get into it. We're going to now talk electric vehicles, right? So I'm going to introduce my first presenter who's going to talk to us about electric vehicles, and that's Aradhana Galot. I think I got it right this time. And let me tell you a little bit about her. She is an associate in the carbon-free mobility team at the Rocky Mountain Institute, where she supports analytical decision-making on transportation, electrification, and sustainable mobility strategies using a data-centric approach. She has a background in quantitative analysis and its application in clean energy and climate policy. Prior to joining Rocky Mountain Institute, she worked on techno-economic analysis to help develop a clean power procurement strategy for the city of Pittsburgh and has studied the energy use of autonomous delivery vehicles and analyzed the effect of rising atmospheric temperatures on aircraft carrying capacity. Ladies and gentlemen, she sounds like a very technical person, but I'm sure she's going to break it down for us. So at this point, please welcome Aradhana Galot.
Thank you very much. And good evening, everyone. Thank you to JPS for giving me the opportunity to talk to you all today about emerging EV trends in the Caribbean. Through this presentation, I'll talk about the urgency of this moment in the climate crisis, how that is related to transportation emissions, and provide a spotlight on key lessons learned from RMI's work on fleet electrification in Bermuda. I'll start with briefly introducing myself and my organization. My name is Aradhana Galot, and I work as an associate at the Carbon Free Mobility Program at RMI. Formerly known as the Rocky Mountain Institute, RMI is a nonprofit based in Colorado in the US, working to decarbonize energy systems through transformative, market-driven solutions in the world's most critical geographies to restrict climate warming to below 1.5 degrees centigrade. My team works on e-mobility topics ranging from fleet electrification to infrastructure assessment studies and electricity rate design. I just want to make sure that the slides are visible. Yes, thank you. Can we move on to the second slide, please? Yes, thank you. Second. Our work within the Caribbean is through two programs, Carbon Free Mobility and Islands Energy. Islands have worked extensively on large-scale energy transition implementation and strategy in multiple island nations in the Caribbean. The mobility team has primarily been involved with the country of Bermuda on their integrated resource plan, solar energy procurement, electric public bus fleet procurement, and island-wide EV policy development. Moving on, it is perhaps most important to highlight the urgency of this moment. Can we go back to the slide just before this one, please? Thank you. With the UN Climate Change Conference, COP26, barely 10 days away, climate change is the talk of the hour. The Caribbean is, of course, no stranger to the impacts of a changing climate, with tropical storms and long shorelines susceptible to sea level rise. The IPCC reports and other recent academic studies have all come to a similar conclusion. This is the decisive decade for our future climate. The initiatives taken up to 2030 will determine where we are in 2050 and possibly the future of our world as a whole. Transportation accounts for 24% of global GHG emissions and 35% of greenhouse gas emissions in the Caribbean and Latin America, making it a hotspot for emission reduction initiatives. Through RMI's emissions and EV adoption analysis, we have determined necessary targets to align with a 1.5 centigrade future. These are as ambitious as 1 in every 4 cars on the road in the United States being electric by 2030. With each global region playing its own part in reducing transportation emissions, there is no doubt that this decade will challenge everything we know about the sector. This leads us to a pertinent question. How do we electrify our vehicles on a larger scale, economically and sustainably? For context, let's move ahead and look at the current state of EV readiness in the Caribbean. The first step in reducing emissions in any sector is setting actionable goals, followed by the initiatives to support them. 11 of 13 islands in the Caribbean communities have established greenhouse gas emission reduction targets, and 6 of 13 have reduction targets specifically for transportation. We know an important consideration for introducing any new island-related technology is the existence of import duties. It is encouraging to see that 4 of 13 islands have already eased or removed import duties on electric vehicles. Of all the Caribbean nations, the Dominican has the largest absolute number of registered EVs, while Bermuda and Barbados have the highest percentage of EVs of total registered vehicles. An upcoming champion that we have identified for the region is Barbados. The island country has turned into the top user of electric vehicles per capita in the Caribbean, with over 430 EVs on the island's roads. With discrete emission reduction goals and a 100% electrification target for its public bus fleet, Barbados is coming up as a model to look towards for islands that are earlier in their electrification journey. As a result of these declared goals and initiatives, Barbados has seen an expansion of available EV imports and increased availability of electric vehicle models on the island. A key insight to draw from this is that demonstrated commitment through reduction targets and government investment can together provide the right support for market stimulation. Let's move ahead and look at another example of a Caribbean nation making an impact in the EV space. RMI's work with Bermuda on e-mobility began 3 years ago with the Department of Public Transport's Bus Electrification Initiative. Our team has led them from a request for information to request for proposal and finally contract selection and negotiation. I'm pleased to announce that they are currently expecting to receive their first order of 30 electric buses early next year. Bermuda already has an EV fleet presence on the island, but in the form of rental cars. Though the number of these EVs on the island are the same as Barbados, they're mostly in the form of these smaller rental cars, thus leading these to penetrate into the larger island market. We can point to 2 actions that have supported Bermuda in the EV journey: the government's commitment to vehicle electrification and the removal of import duty on electric vehicles. Centralized support for EVs has enabled all relevant stakeholders to be engaged in the process, leading to a favorable environment for EV policy development. A commonly identified issue is that EVs are more expensive than their gasoline counterparts. The absence of import duty improves their case by making them more affordable compared to the ICE vehicles. Through this multi-year and multi-project effort, we identified three prime challenges faced by the island. First being the low availability of EV models through dealers on island. Smaller scale EV procurements are limited to dealer availability, since the volume and cost is too low to request a special overseas procurement. This is in part due to the yet to mature nature of the EV market and is expected to be solved with time as adoption and demand grows and more commitment is demonstrated. The second and third challenges are those affecting the economics of vehicle electrification. High startup costs and electricity rates. Startup costs such as infrastructure installation, grid side, and depot upgrades are part of introducing any new technology and can be considered as one-time costs for multiple fleet cycles. When considered as external to the price of the vehicles themselves, some of these costs also have the potential to be covered through innovative financing. For example, through the electric utility, through an innovative billing model. High electricity costs are primarily a result of high demand charges that are particularly unfriendly for fast charging of EVs due to high peak loads. As a result, the next steps for the island to further streamline their electrification efforts are creating a national EV policy and roadmap that includes the electrification of the government fleet, as well as the large taxi car fleet. Within this, we hope to simulate the creation of a second-hand EV market to make these vehicles more affordable, both for commercial use as well as personal buyers. The next is working with the electric utility and regulatory authority to explore the creation of an EV charging rate structure with the potential to include time of use rates for peak and off-peak billing. Having spoken of these two islands that are building a vision of success in the region, let's consider the first and foremost step when establishing the case for EVs. And that is generating buy-in from the government, the electric utility, and other stakeholders, as well as the public. EVs offer benefits that are particularly important to island nations. Emissions reduction, air quality improvement, and even noise reduction directly help preserve natural ecosystems as well as boost tourism. Right sizing of vehicles is another important consideration for safe and efficient operations on narrow island roads. EV models can offer appropriately smaller vehicles without compromising on performance. The economic benefit of EVs is considerable. The Inter-American Development Bank estimates that the Caribbean could save up to $2 billion in fuel savings by switching to EVs over the next 20 years. Through lower maintenance costs and time, as well as with electricity being less expensive per mile than gasoline, EVs operate at roughly half the cost of their internal combustion engine counterparts. The other benefit of electrification, not just for vehicles, but all fuel sources, that is less expensive, can be renewable, and leads to job how of bringing EVs to island roads. I'd like to wrap up the discussion with some key recommendations for supporting vehicle electrification in the Caribbean. The first that's already been mentioned is the reduction of import duty on EVs, acting in a similar way as a subsidy on capital costs to boost the market. The next is developing a procurement and deployment strategy that takes advantage of current process, as well as economies of scale. For example, identifying older vehicles that are already up and procuring in groups to get the best bulk rates on the vehicles, as well as spread the infrastructure costs to power a larger fleet. The last but not the least recommendation is to engage with the electric utility and regulatory authority to develop electricity rates that favor EV charging cycles and yet still provide payback for the utility. With that, I come to the end of my presentation. Thank you all for listening and for your time this Thursday evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. A lot of information being shared there. Round of applause. We're getting some round of applause here in the room. Thank you so much, Ms. Galot. Very valuable information being shared. I heard some very interesting proposals being put forward on the table. For example, the public bus fleet being electrified. That's something that we would look forward to in Jamaica, I'm sure, that would benefit us as a nation. And I'm guaranteeing you, Ms. Galot, that when you talk about this again in any space, you're going to be mentioning Jamaica, not just Barbados and Bermuda, because after today's session, we're going to have people going EV. I can tell you that. All right, now at this point in time, I want to introduce Dion Nugent, and she's going to be taking control because she's going to be managing the roundtable discussion, and she's going to introduce her guests as well. But let me introduce her to you first. Dion is the moderator for the roundtable discussion, and she's a registered professional engineer and the JPS's Director of Business Development. She's the technical lead and chair of the steering committee for the project, Building Sustainable Electric Mobility Ecosystem for Inclusion and Access. Dion has over 25 years experience at JPS and has been integral in the introduction of LNG, that's liquefied natural gas, to the JPS generation fleet, the negotiation of 300 megawatts of power purchase agreements for several renewable thermal energy projects, among other major programs. At this point in time, I'm turning over to Dion Nugent. Give her a round of applause.
Welcome again to our Women's EV Forum. She's in charge. And in this discussion, we're not around a round table today, this segment. Our focus is on breaking barriers. That's our theme in this section. So as everybody knows, a barrier is any obstacle that prevents us from achieving or progressing towards our desired goal. And we know that breaking barriers is never easy. To break barriers, it demands our awareness, energy, focus, empowerment, vision, and action. So I just want to let you know today that we are already breaking barriers in this new e-mobility sector. Watch out, Barbados, we are coming. We have hybrid electric vehicles already on the island. And in fact, we have our charging stations. And I'm telling you, from the government end, there's a lot of work that is happening to get the policy in place to support it. And we do continue to have very strong climate change activists and entrepreneurs involved in the sector. So things are happening. In fact, people keep on saying, and I know that one of our members participating today says that we need to put back up that banner on the JPS building that had a massive EV on it. It's time again to have an updated version of the vehicle plugged in on our wall. And it indeed sparked an interesting conversation a few years back. Today, we have a distinguished panel of women leaders to discuss how they have already broken barriers in their own area of influence and their outlook on breaking barriers as we seek to drive the expansion of e-mobility in Jamaica. On the panel, I have to tell you that we have entrepreneurs, advocates for women in business, corporate executives, parish queens, farmers, lecturers, former race car drivers, wives and mothers. This is important because we all have a role to play in making this sector a success. We're all here to talk about building a sustainable electric mobility ecosystem that considers inclusion and access for everyone. And today we're talking about women. So it's my pleasure to introduce, and I'm going to go through the introductions. I'm going to take a little time. I want you to get to know these wonderful women. And first of all, to my left is Mrs. Eleanor Jones, Chairman and CEO of Environmental Solutions. Eleanor is an international environmental risk management and development professional with significant experience in the fields of environmental and social safeguards, disaster risk management, climate resilience building, and sustainable development. She has over 30 years of experience in her area, impacting several continents. I could name out quite all of the continents right here. And indeed, Eleanor, in 2017 was a recipient of the Bronze Musgrave Medal for Distinction in the field of science, and in 2018 she was awarded the Order of Distinction in the rank of officer for her contribution to the development of environmental management and to civic development. We applaud you for your great work for this nation. I want to introduce Ethne Miller Simpson. She's on screens and president of the Women's Entrepreneurs Network of the Caribbean. Ethne is a learning architect, branding specialist, and global speaker with over 25 years building human capital, economic empowerment of women regionally, and SME capacity building. She's a fellow of the 14 U.S. State Department Global Women's Mentoring Program, a fellow of the Sherry Blair Foundation, Clinton Global Initiative panelist alongside IDB President Louis Moreno and Gail Lemon from the U.S. Council of Foreign Relations. She is the Chief Growth Officer and CEO of Synergy International, focused on branding people, education, technology products and services, and is also country manager for Farm Crowdy, Jamaica. I got that right, Ethne? On stage with me as well, we have Jacqueline Stewart-Leclerc, Director of Stewart's Auto Sales, phenomenal woman leader here. Jacqueline's family business started as an automobile service garage in 1938 and has expanded into an automotive group comprising 8 companies, retailing, passenger and commercial vehicles and parts, construction and industrial equipment, car rental, fleet management, and financing. I tell you, we have all of the experience here. Jacqueline's over 35 years of experience in the automobile sector have made her a powerhouse in a male-dominated industry. The Stewart's Automotive Group represents such brands, take note, as Mercedes-Benz, Mitsubishi, Suzuki, Jaguar, Honda, motorcycle, and others. We need to mention also plays a crucial role in the Richard and Diana Stewart Foundation, which has strong focus on community outreach. And our 4th panelist today is Zara Oliphant, PhD, Acting Director for Corporate Planning and Performance in the Ministry of Science, Energy, and Technology. Hi, Zara. And Dr. Zara the government service in 2016 as the Chief Research Officer in the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology. As head of the research unit, she has led research relevant to national policies, plans, and strategies, and ultimately relevant to national development. One such research report was a report on electric vehicles in 2017. So she's very, very knowledgeable about this area, and which was updated in 2018 and served as an early contributor to the discussion on electric mobility. She has represented the ministry at both regional and local levels regarding e-mobility and currently serves as a member of the Electric Vehicle Technical Working Group and Electric Vehicle Council. What a panel, what a group of leaders. And what we're saying today, we believe that we have the capacity to make a big difference in this developing sector. So to start our proceedings, we're not going to take any more time. We want each panelist to share their own personal experience, to give us some snapshots of some of the barriers they have had to overcome in their own journey. And as we look at electric vehicles, how do they see their role to overcome barriers right now in this sector? Because we are about action. We're about taking it on and making it happen in Jamaica. After this session, we're going to open up the floor to questions, to get your questions going. And I'm going to start the ball rolling with Eleanor to my left.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. I feel like I'm in an electric sphere.
Come on
here.
now.
Yes, a lot of excitement,
Yes,
a lot of
it is.
passion in the room. Thank you very much. And I want to congratulate the JPS Foundation and the IDB for this very timely intervention in the climate change mitigation space, where the message is related to the promotion of clean energy and sustainable transportation modes and infrastructure. It's also a message related to the promotion of the business of climate mitigation and the business of the environment and climate resilient investment. It is timely as the startling revelations from the most recent report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, these revelations continue to raise alarms on the need for enhanced climate action to stem on the unabated the greenhouse gas emissions. The race to net zero emissions for a low carbon future and to hold global warming to 1.5 degrees is desperate.
Yeah.
We know that in Jamaica, women entrepreneurs play a dominant role in women-owned and family-owned businesses in the MSME as well as larger categories. 78 to 80% of enterprises in the Caribbean region, contributing 60 to 70% of the gross domestic product, accounting for 50% employment. For Jamaica, MSMEs make up 97% of the private sector, believe it or not, and account for 90% of the jobs in the country. In its economy, right? Country. They are major users of energy.
Yes.
All of these entrepreneurs, they are producers of greenhouse gases, and importantly, they require sustained attention to climate action of their businesses and the communities in which they operate. We know that changing to low carbon emissions and adapting to climate change impacts will be an enormous challenge for Jamaica, as it is for other CARICOM states, requiring public and private sector coordination and support of development partners to transition to low carbon and climate resilient development. What we have here this afternoon, this evening, is just that. We have government, we have private sector, and we have development partners working together. The opportunities for promoting climate resilience for private sector actors and for all citizens and communities through climate change mitigation and adaptation are numerous. But today we are focused on the transport sector and electric mobility. Our eyes are turned, as you heard earlier, reference, Dion, to the heightened preparation for the Global Climate Change Conference, COP26, which is scheduled for Glasgow beginning the end of next week, end of the month. Key considerations for COP26 include transitioning to clean power, enhanced climate action to secure global net zero by 2050, speed up the transport sector to electric vehicles, restore nature for the benefit of communities and habitats, mobilize finance, and work together, and this is important, work together in a collaborative way to make all of these things happen. So I am honored and pleased to participate in this forum. As an environmental scientist, I'm pleased as a woman in energy and committed to capacity building in the energy sector, and we have heard reference to that. And perhaps if you would allow me, several years ago, the JPS had a dynamic program for women in energy, and so I really am very happy to be a part of this again, and happy that we also have the leader of that initiative at the time on the panel with us, Kelly Tomlin, and of course we have Dion, and we have Winsome, who were very involved in that sphere. This is significant because we're looking at the environment and climate change, and we are promoting the adoption and implementation of an EV ecosystem, which you heard about. And so we need to ask the fundamental question, why? Why are we doing this? There are several interlocking reasons. We've heard about energy efficiency, we've heard about cost reduction, We have heard about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And very importantly, we need to reduce the extreme events which have come and are particularly striking in the Caribbean as a consequence of global warming from these emissions. However, I would like to suggest that one of the key considerations for clean transportation, for this electric vehicle initiative, is public health. Climate change is one of the greatest threats to public health, and therefore there are significant health opportunities for climate action. The Paris Declaration called for broadening the effort toward electrification of transport, aiming to have at least 20% road vehicles electrically powered by 2030. Speeding the transition to clean energy is one of the most important things we can do to improve health. Participants may recall that participants here, those of us who are participating in this forum, that with the COVID lockdown last year, 2020, satellite photos revealed significant reduction in air pollutants, with a reduction in transport and manufacturing particularly. This told a riveting story, as anecdotal reports supported some of these aerial observations. Environmental protection is essential to stymieing climate risks and fostering human health, and the electric vehicle intervention is an important aspect of that. Environmental Solutions Limited, of which I am the principal and co-founder, entered the environmental space in 1991. We have been around for some time, blazing a trail to focus on harmonizing economic and land development with sound environmental principles. We were inspired by the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, which was held in Rio, often referred to as the Rio Conference, where the message of sustainable development and integrating economic development with the environment were put forward. Barriers, challenges, hurdles related to a lack of understanding and acceptance of the need for science to underpin development decision making. And to a great extent, or not a great, but to some extent, shall we say, that still exists today in some realms. So we had to help educate, we had to train practitioners, we had to train regulators. We were involved in really moving the environmental space forward. However, Environmental Solutions Limited has been driven, ESL as we call ourselves, driven by purpose and passion. Much of the purpose and passion that we see here on this forum this evening, to improve human health as the health of land and as well as the health of land and livelihoods. The company has taken on significant portfolios in applying science to environmental health, diligence and planning to climate and disaster risk reduction, and resilience building. One of the areas more directly related to this evening's forum is our environmental health and analytical services, which are internationally certified to deliver standards of excellence. We distinguish ourselves in providing quality real-time measurements to provide data to support timely and effective decision making. We provide our clients with risk matrices and sensitization training. Respiratory ailments are a major concern, especially in the growing urban areas, and as we see increasing traffic gridlock and unacceptable idling and vehicular emissions, the need to move to clean transport is becoming more glaring. Air quality is fundamental to health, and some research is showing that the respiratory impacts of the COVID disease are exacerbated by poor air quality, both indoors and outdoors. Good air quality is dependent on adequate ventilation, which in turn is dependent on fresh air intake. So if the outdoor quality is poor, then that transfers to the interior through your doors, through your windows, and through your ventilation ducts, and so on. So as we try to move the needle for the electric vehicle, for clean energy, for low emissions, we need, as we have you have alluded to part of your EV ecosystem, sensitization, awareness building. We need to focus on the why. We need to emphasize, I would like to suggest, as you promote this, it's important to speak of the greenhouse gas emissions and energy, but it's important to look at what's in it for me. Why do I need this? Clean. I need health for myself. I need help for my children, because children are more affected by the particulates which are generated. We need health for our workspaces. Asthma, sinusitis are major problems for us and getting worse in our urban areas. And so emission control, clean air are important. Yes, we must reduce global warming, we must reduce extreme events, but we also need to improve our health. And the EV track is a good way, a good beginning, shall we say, for us to consider. So congratulations again, JPS, and we look forward to the electric excitement which we feel this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Eleanor. Fantastic. The why. We know to understand the why. And I think that as women, the why is so important. This impacts ourselves, our families, our children, and public health, which is so active today. We really need to ensure that as we step into this new sector, that we have that why at the forefront. And we know that government is very important to ensuring that the why is delivered. So Zara, I'm going to put you on the spot now, right? You have been a leader in this space, working in the Ministry of Energy and supporting policy development. Let's hear your perspective on this new sector.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, moderator. And good evening, everyone, to my fellow panelists, to our MC for this evening. Good evening, and on behalf of my permanent secretary, Mrs. Carol Palmer, I am happy that the ministry was invited to this initiative. As you have rightly said, this cannot be done without government being involved. And so we're really happy to take part in this. And from my perspective as a young lady, as a previous panelist, I heard her mention being at Women in Energy. Yeah. I was also at that session, and it was absolutely wonderful. I was there as just a viewer, as someone participating from the viewership end. And today I'm here in a forum for JPS as a panelist. So awesome. I believe that's a barrier. That's a barrier that I have broken as a young lady in energy. So as was mentioned in the introduction, as Chief Research Officer at the time, I led the unit when we researched into best practices and the applicability of electric mobility in Jamaica. And that was one of the earliest documents to come out of the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology on this area. And then on May 14, 2018, by way of cabinet decision, the ministry was mandated to develop an electric vehicle sub-policy. It's arising out of that decision that the ministry then entered into an agreement with the Inter-American Development Bank, the IDB, for assistance. And that was a technical cooperation with a start date of October 2019. So what the government is doing now at this particular stage, it's the technical cooperation with the IDB has really set that framework. The TC actually has 4 components. The first being the development of an electric mobility strategic framework and regulatory support. The second is a public sector fleet assessment. The third is for training and communication. And the fourth is program coordination, monitoring, and evaluation. So the cabinet decision was that sub-policy should be developed for electric mobility, but that has to be grounded in something, and that's where the strategic framework comes. So this framework actually considers 4 scenarios for electric mobility, and the scenario that the government is pursuing is actually the most aggressive scenario, which is Jamaica goes electric.
Okay.
And so under this scenario, what is envisioned is that the public transportation fleet will take the lead in electric vehicle acquisition, increasing its electric vehicle share. And we saw that before in some of the the public fleet being electrified in certain islands. And yes, indeed, we want it to be that the next time she presents at a forum, she has Jamaica listed as an example, right? So under this scenario, the public transportation fleet takes the lead, and then those benefits are extended through to the private fleet. And what is envisioned from the scenario is that by 2030, the national fleet is composed of 12% electric vehicles, 12%. So that is a very aggressive move that we're making. And what this will lead to the previous presenter spoke about climate change and the environmental impact. I am an environmental scientist, as that's where I am grounded in before the government part kicks in. So this is an area that I am also very desirous of seeing a change. We have seen the impact of greenhouse gas emissions, and so if we can decarbonize the transportation sector, then that will be the ideal for the environment. So scenario 4 does anticipate greenhouse gas emissions to be reduced by 14% from the base scenario that is in the strategic framework. So for Jamaica to go electric, according to scenario 4, there are key policy considerations that are needed from the government standpoint. And the strategic framework, it has all of it, fiscal incentives. And this is what I'm sure a lot of persons are asking about, what's going to happen with import duties, what kind of incentives, especially with EVs currently being more expensive than ICE vehicles. So there is need for fiscal incentives to really, really get the population to say, okay, it's cheaper for me to get an EV, and that paired with the environmental benefits will take us to where we need to go. Of course, there needs to be charging infrastructure and standards, the regulatory framework and tariff mechanisms, safety requirements, because even one of the things that came out of the research we did is that the first responders on site when an electric vehicle crashes, for example, how they operate and what they do is so completely different from how they deal with an ICE vehicle. So safety requirements is very important, and that level of training. Of course, vehicle to grid technology, which is another technology that that can be realized with electric vehicles. The impact on the grid, battery disposal. That's another key thing, especially from the environmental standpoint, because the batteries used in electric vehicles, they have a certain lifetime. So what happens at the end, right? Renewable energy integration. When charging your electric vehicles is paired with a decarbonized source, then the positive environmental effects increase. And of course, training and public education is very critical. And the strategic framework does have action items for these areas, and the government is currently at the point of, because I know this is the question that persons want to know, where are we with this framework? What's happening, right? The strategic framework is currently, the very final draft is done, and it's just some matters now, especially regarding the fiscal incentives that are being fine-tuned for approval by cabinet, so that we can next start to implement the action items in this framework. And happening in tandem with that is the OUR has actually been working on a regulatory framework, and they had a public consultation just a few months ago. The document is still available online. And that document speaks to a number of areas. For example, the impact on the grid, the tariffs. I saw someone on YouTube asking about time of use rates, right? And these are all considerations that the OUR is currently taking on board. So the stakeholder consultation was done, and based on the questions that the document asked and the the scenarios and the different concising that, so that they can have a set regulatory framework specific to electric vehicles. So there's a lot that's happening on the government end, and I am happy that as a young woman I am involved in that process. In terms of breaking barriers, a lot of times, we see the male faces, talking about things when it comes to vehicles and so on. I am happy that I can be part of the process. I actually attended and received a certificate for EV training, and it included mechanics, and I was the person from the ministry that did that training. So personally speaking, I do believe I have broken some barriers in this particular area. And I am also excited to see a lot of these plans and these action items as envisioned by the framework really, start moving, so that everyone can see that the government is also serious about this. And that brings me to the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Zara. I mean, that's a mouthful. A lot's happening. The government is really, I know, doing a lot, and the regulators and other stakeholders. So we really want to thank you for giving us that perspective. And I know you're in the hot seat most of the time, and that's why I'm moving over to Jackie now. You talk about fleet conversions, you're talking about what are the incentives to bring the vehicles here, and what is required to make it happen. So we're really excited to hear Jackie's perspective on it. And I'm sorry, team members, panelists are running out of time. I've been enjoying myself so much here, but we want to give everybody enough time just to make sure that we can get everything through. So Jackie, over to you.
All right, thank you. JPS, IDB, thank you for having me. Electric mobility.
Yes.
So this has been a 35-year journey. Okay. When I started working, we were talking about manual transmissions versus automatic transmissions. Then we had the discussion about fuel.
Yes.
Should it be petrol or diesel?
Yes.
And then Kelly Tomlin, she brought the plug-in hybrid to Jamaica
yes.
with the Mitsubishi Outlander. You alluded to it, about the plug on the side of your building. So thank you to Kelly for starting that journey. We continued with the Mercedes-Benz brand in 2017 for the plug-ins. 2021, we introduced full electric with the Jaguar I-Pace. So I wanted to let Jamaica know that we have fully electric vehicles here in Jamaica. Yes, we do have electricians trained in fully electric and plug-in hybrids, and we're very excited about this journey. The reality is that through Jamaica Energy Partners, as well as JPS, there will be 60 charging stations across the island from St. Thomas to Negril. So we're going to be able to serve the public. But you mentioned the price barrier. So that's what we need to break. From 2018, our company has been lobbying the government to look at the duties. And I noticed that all the presenters before me, including MSET, thank you, has been talking about that being the way to go. And that it is. We need to make the vehicles cost effective, and then it will kick in with the low maintenance costs and saving lives, as Miss Eleanor said. So we won't forget that part. So yes, I think Jamaica is ready for it. I think by 2030, globally, they won't have 30% vehicles to be electric. So what can Jamaica do? I hear us talking about our public transport. I think that's excellent, because once they start, I think the regular consumer is going to be ready to start. So I've kind of given you a mouthful. I don't know if you want to jump in and ask me any questions.
I have my questions ready for you for later.
All right.
I'm going to give Ethne the chance now. Who is an advocate for women in business? So, Jackie is your corporate, you're involved over 30 years. Ethne is talking about how do women get involved? How do we get into the action and get it happening for them? So Ethne, e-mobility and electric vehicles is where we want you to be now. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Dion, and thank you to everyone who is here. As my sisters on the panel have said, we need to stay congratulations and thanks to IDB as well as to JPS. And I will admit that this feels like a Women in Energy reunion because once a woman in energy, always a woman in energy. So it's great to be back with quite a few of us who are a part of the Women in Energy some years ago. And with Kelly, of course, being here tonight, it is super good, super, super good. So I want to actually start by framing things a little bit differently because a lot of the data has been shared, a lot of the information has been shared, and I'm happy that government is at the table. I'm happy that the private sector is at the table. But I want to go further down that column of private sector where we want to focus on SMEs and focus on women who are SMEs. Within the whole conversation of e-mobility, and I remember when Winston and I first spoke about this, you know, getting a sense of, okay, this change is happening globally. So as Jackie just said, you know, Jamaica needs to also change and move with the change that is happening. So what exactly can we expect, or would the ecosystem require? And in building out that ecosystem, recognizing that yes, government has to be a part of it, government agencies have to be there as well as and the private sector, but as women in businesses and women in small to medium businesses, I want to start by shining a light on the fact that with COVID and the pandemic that we're living through, more women lost their jobs than men during the pandemic. And representing an organization which is the Women Entrepreneurs Network of the Caribbean, with just about 140 SME women in that network in Jamaica. The conversation since last year, the 10th of March, has been, oh my goodness, how do I pivot? How do I change my business? And this conversation came up. I remember saying to Winsome, I can't wait to hear where we're going to be in another year, because it should be presented as an opportunity to drive the economy, to drive resilience, and to get many of our women whose businesses went under or who have been trying to pivot, to get those women to see opportunities within this IDB JPS framework. So in the information that has been shared as well as the research, some of the changes that we can anticipate would be to not just vehicles. I know we're going to talk a lot about vehicles, electric scooters, power chairs, even rise recliners, and I'm mentioning even fishing boats and engines. Why am I mentioning these? For an SME woman in business, and I'll use an example from our network, which is actually, I want to make sure I get her name right, or the name of her company right, is NBR Wholesale and Retail. And I remember the conversation with this woman in business, and she said, Ethne, you know something, I'm going to start doing seafood and fish. Now, when we think of seafood and fish, the big companies come to mind. But here is a woman who is putting her business out there. And in this conversation, what will happen to that boat engine in her business? How does she change that? How does she finance that? So the innovation fund that Winston mentioned earlier is one of the key conversations we need to have. And we talk about incentives. How will the incentives be passed down to SMEs? Through the commercial banks or through an IDB or Exim Bank that many of us go to avail ourselves of funding. So that is one of the big conversations that we should have this evening, and if not this evening, going forward. In talking through growth and resilience for Jamaica, and recognizing that, yes, the government will kickstart everything and transition their fleet, and then looking to private sector. I remember another conversation again with another woman about, actually two other women, about the taxi system, safety, crime and issues that we have in Jamaica, and sexual harassment and so on. And here was a woman coming up with a conversation to say, okay, I'm going to start a taxi company. What's the cost of that fleet? Now, in this conversation, since this is on the table, is how exactly would that be facilitated for an SME female? Another one I want to put on the table, having to do with training and development and so on. Yes, we have Heart Trust. Yes, we have JBDC. Yes, we have all of the other training institutions. But to get our workforce back into a productive frame of mind, how is this going to be put on the table so that quite a few of our training institutions and women who are coaches and trainers and so on can get involved in what it is that we are talking about this evening. As I close, I wanted to look at the whole cost issue and also the research and development issue, because what we're also seeing in the research is that the women are not necessarily taken into consideration the way we should be. There are a couple of patterns that I just want to highlight. Travel patterns of men and women differ significantly. So, for example, if a woman is taking her child to a friend's house after daycare, who also has a child, and they go shopping together, is that an accompanying trip? Is it childcare? Is it leisure activity? There's some small bits that still need to be worked out in the research and development of and product design, and to consider where women fall in all of this. Women travel more sustainably though than men, and we do travel more frequently. So where are the opportunities there? Yes, we may be less willing to experiment than men with the different types of vehicles, and men will try, the new technologies first. But women want a practical service. So a question that we are asking as the Women Entrepreneurs Network of the Caribbean is, what is the service going to be like? How practical will it be? Knowing too that female early adopters use battery electric vehicles more often than the ICE. And we see EVs, actually, women generally see EVs more positively. So this conversation this evening is an excellent one to have with women because of the natural, intuitive leaning that women have towards EVs. And in terms of the cost, as was mentioned before, yes, we do have to tackle the cost question. And over time, it will cost less. But in the training and development, it would be great if we actually included some scenarios so that a woman who is thinking of purchasing a vehicle, purchasing a boat engine for her business, changing out fans and whatever system she has in her office, can start seeing herself in the example, which I think is really, really important. So I will just share this for the time being, and then allow other persons to jump in and to continue the conversation. Thank you very much, Dion.
Thank you, Ethne. And, some very, very important points that have been raised there as we look at women, small, medium-sized businesses. How do they participate? How they fund? One of the areas that I think that's ripe for growth in the EV sector is taxis. So I was very happy to hear about the example about a woman trying to start a taxi business. And you could imagine a woman starting an electric taxi business. I mean, that should be a phenomenal example of how we can drive the space. And I want to pick up and ask the panel. I'll throw it out to the panel. The fact that our behavior as it relates to electric vehicles, women, the statistics indicate that typically on traditional vehicles, in terms of purchases, it's 50-50 between men and women. But when it comes to electric vehicles, we're at 75-25. 75% men, 25% women. My question is, what is really causing that issue, why the interest of women in purchasing electric vehicles, where we know that women tend to be very sensitive to issues of health and climate. Is there anything happening here that's causing the reluctance of women to get into that space? I'm throwing it out generally. I'm not sure if anyone wants to take a bite at that.
I would. You want to go, Ethne?
Ethne seems to have
My quick response on that one was the advertising. When you look at the advertising of the vehicles, it's not highlighting the features that women would intuitively gravitate towards. So bringing the marketers to the table is going to be interesting, in addition to the conversation, because as I mentioned before, there are particular things that women are looking for that traditional marketing of automobiles do not necessarily cater to women.
Okay. Ethne. Hear me, Eleanor.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think women also tend to be more conservative.
Okay.
And so they want to ensure that you have something that's tried and tested. And so the awareness building, sensitization, which follows up on Ethne's point about the marketing. people they need to understand, and as we said, the why.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that perhaps is not put forward, and a lot of persons don't really understand the significance of greenhouse gas emission.
Okay.
What does that have to do with me, really?
Okay.
You know, so let's bring the message to what's in it for me.
So Jackie, help me here now. You're on the floor.
No, well, I was going to say that, you know, we women break barriers, but when it comes to transportation, we usually look to the men for guidance.
We do?
And this is a new technology, and so I
Because
think
we think they know more about vehicles.
it's technically,
You're right.
it has, you know, traditionally been a very male-dominated
Yes.
field.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
in fact, you mentioned breaking barriers. Our company actually, as far as I know, has the only female service managers in Jamaica. So when you ladies buy your electric I-Pace, it will be a lady who will be taking care of you to
Okay.
check your batteries and
Awesome.
so on. So I think it's really about education at the
Okay.
end of the day.
Yes.
We're learning about a whole new different setup.
So have you seen a lot of women on the floor looking at the Jaguar I-Pace?
Well, I have to be brutally honest that it's been all males who have purchased
Okay.
the I-Pace is so
Gonna change
far. But we're going to fix that.
Ego.
We're going to fix that. We're going to deal with the price issue
Yes.
because us ladies have to balance the books
Yes,
with our
yes,
families.
yes.
So that might be why we're being a bit cautious, as you said earlier.
Okay. Okay.
So it will happen.
And
Yes, Sarah.
yes, I just wanted to add to that. The matter of education is so important, and building that public awareness, because yes, men tend to be the one take the lead when it comes to things pertaining to motor vehicles. But I believe it's very easy to sell an EV to a woman. There's so many properties. For example, the fact that it is so quiet. You know, as women, we tend to not like noisy things, right? So in an EV, you get a nice, smooth, quiet drive.
You never
And
do.
another thing that's a big selling point, one of the things for us as women is the whole possibility of breaking down on the road, having to have someone assist us. But EV the maintenance is so low in comparison to an ICE. I read an example out of Barbados where the guy said that he has gone 2 years without doing anything to his EV. So some selling points that would attract to women, the fact that we don't have to be running to the mechanic every 3 to 6 months. It's nice and quiet. So I think it's all about that public education to really sell that vision of EVs just being nice and classy and right up there with what we want as women.
Excellent.
Well, there's another bit that I would just want to tack on, and as it pertains to travel patterns of women versus men differ significantly. So a working father will travel directly to work and home in the evening. A working mother has to factor in different destinations that she has to visit. So whether it is daycare, whether it is shopping for something in the evening that the child may need for school the next day, a doctor's visit possibly, taking care of elderly relatives. And in this COVID period, we have seen what has happened with our elderly. So paying attention to them is really important. So the current advertising tends to be a little bit more linear at this point in time, and it's more geared towards men. We need to look at the socialization as well around the vehicles, and not just, like I keep saying, it's more than the vehicles, because EV might be electric vehicles, but e-mobility refers to quite a bit more in terms of the ecosystem and the industry. The mobility behavior needs to also be looked at. We need to scrutinize the data pool and include women in everyday mobility in order to increase the appeal. So if we hit these particular targets, then it is likely that we will see that more women will be more interested where the vehicles are concerned.
Thank you for that, Ethne. And it certainly does highlight that we need to understand our own local realities and how our people operate, and what are the things that impact on us. The fact is that if you have to make multiple stops, an EV is a good option. You're not actually, and in traffic, for example, it's a good option. And therefore, I think that if we can say to somebody who lives in Portmore, who's maybe in traffic, who may be having to shuttle back and forth on a regular basis.
Yes.
This could be a good idea for you, It could make sense for you and your business. And it says that we really have to be stronger in terms of our public relations and our awareness on the technology. I have a question from the public for Jackie. Somebody wants to understand, how you get your voice heard in this male-dominated area, where in vehicles where you, as you have said, it's men. How have you been able to navigate that in your experience over these years?
Little but Talawa. So I think the reality is it's all I have known, and so I've grown with the business and grown with the industry.
Yes. Excellent. And I mean, that for me is a powerful thing, because it's not about your size, it's about your own presence and your drive in the space as well. And I don't discount the 30 odd years of experience as well. I may take one or two questions from the audience. Is there any other one? So I think that we are close to.
Yes, speaker.
Yes, I asked the question, so I'm not sure, yes, if we have any other questions. But I do have one question that if we don't have any more, we are women, and our children are going to be the one that's going to be living this reality next 10 years. We heard Zara talking about, Jamaica is going for the aggressive scenario in terms of Jamaica goes electric by 2030. It says a lot is about to happen. That means that our children are going to be the ones who are more than likely driving electric vehicles. How do we position them to embrace the technology? Do we need to do anything? Is it, is it going to be something automatic? Because, they are a lot more tech and in touch. Is there anything we should be doing in that space to get them prepared for this new future that we know is coming?
Because this is a women's forum, I'd say to you that we have to think about safety and security. So once we can answer the question of how do they charge their vehicles in a timely manner, and that they can do all the activities that Ethne spoke about, I think we're going to be there. Because they'll buy into it because they're new and young, but they're going to need the safety and security, and we need the cost effectiveness.
Yes.
I cannot push that point that we need to reduce our import duties.
Here's Zara.
I can't impress.
I hear.
And certainly, I hear the point Ethne talking about in terms of how we generate business and how we bring the financing and the funding to the sector so that people can participate. I really want to thank you, the audience, for staying with us, being a part of the conversation. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. Thank you to all my panelists. It has been super. I thank you for the why, thank you for the perspective shared in government, in private sector, and in women in business, small, medium-sized businesses. I think it has been instructive, and we will be continuing the conversation. Thank you all again.
Just before you close, we have a few questions here.
Okay.
That I'm going to put to the panel. All right, this one is for Eleanor. You mentioned the impact of public health. Can we quantify what that impact could be? Can this really enable a healthier society?
Yes, it can. I can't quantify it here, sitting here clearly, but one of the things we need to do, we need to be doing more monitoring and more measurement, because we know that we have very high, we know what the particulates do. We know we have high incidence of asthma and all of these respiratory ailments. And so reducing, we can see what happens in other parts of the world where some you have clean air and you don't have these effects.
Right.
So it can work.
Can work. All right, another question here, and this one is for you, Jackie. This one says, what is the general sentiment that you've noticed from customers towards EVs?
A wait-and-see approach. I think the pricing is spooking the clients a little bit, and also the availability of the value products, because it's more the premium products that have come out with the technology more quickly in the new vehicle brands that we represent. And so we need to have more mainstream offerings.
Right.
So it's been a wait-and-see approach, but people are realizing and saying it is the future. It's going to happen. In 5 years, it will look different.
Okay, a question from me, following on from your explanation. In other countries where EVs were introduced, how long did it take for, let's say, the prices to go to a point where person, the average man on the street or the average woman on the street became interested in it?
Okay,
in
so I
purchasing?
think that the vehicles are still expensive. If you were to follow the Tesla model, you would see that. So honestly, I think it's middle and upper middle class worldwide that has been driving electric vehicles, and we need to change that dynamic. And many countries don't have the high import duties that we in the Caribbean do.
Yeah.
So that is a factor.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Ethne, this one is for you. Do you see a major entrepreneurial opportunity coming out of EVs that you are excited about?
Oh, yes. And I say yes because that taxi idea is grounded in the safety and security of our women. There are quite a few others in terms of the training and development opportunities. When you started Ruthlin, either yourself or Winsome mentioned the whole partnership in terms of education and training. There are quite a few small training companies that need those kinds of partnerships. Also, too, with mechanics, there are quite a few, and I created a little list, not just with the taxi and the rental cars, but also when you start looking at the clean air approach that Eleanor mentioned, and we start looking at, say, tourism as a sector. If we go sector by sector, and then you look across that band at the small and medium enterprises that operate within each sector, I want to put it squarely on the table for, I think it is Zara, to consider that the Electric Mobility Act, I'm not sure if we have one yet, but we do need to have one. We need to look at e-registration marks and what that means. If, let's say, one of Jackie's vehicles carried that e-registration mark, what does it tell the purchaser? What are the incentives for purchasers as well? So not just for the SME women in business who would want to pivot their businesses, but also looking at the purchasers. Where are the incentives that, you know, Tom or Mary, who is going to be purchasing a vehicle tomorrow morning, can say, I want that particular incentive, and that becomes a driver of my buying decision. So, you know, putting all of these together, looking at special parking spaces at charging points, what that means, are there incentives for those? There is a whole conversation. So there should be a part 2 to this conversation this evening.
All right, I have maybe one more question. Allowed? All right, this one is for Zara. The question is, regular cars are still flooding into the island. How soon can we expect policies that will provide tangible incentives to import EVs rather than vehicles that use petroleum-based fuels?
And that is a very valid question, very valid. And this is what the strategic framework, the approval of the strategic framework by Cabinet, once that we get that approval, then the action items which speak to the fiscal incentives that will the hope is that it disincentivizes the importation of ICE vehicles. So out of that approval, the action items in the framework can then be implemented, and the different policy considerations will come into effect. So what you mentioned before, Ethne, regarding the incentives for the purchasers, these are all considerations that we have. So unfortunately, I can't give you a specific time, but right now it is at an advanced stage. So we are hoping in the near future that we'll be able to see these actions being put in place.
Okay. All right. The final question. If a company wanted to have an EV charging port at their company, would that be allowed?
Well, that specific consideration, the regulatory framework that the OUR is currently finalizing will address those matters. Because there are a number of considerations for that.
Can you say how the owner would go about getting this installed? Do you know the process?
No, I wouldn't be able to speak to the process at this time.
Question?
Okay. The question?
Yes.
If a complex, sorry, not a company, if a complex wanted to have an EV charging station port installed at the complex, how would they go about doing that, and how would it be allowed?
So let me attempt that one. So it's something that we're, just to give a broad context, it's something that we're working through because we do know that there are developers now who are starting to include EV charging facilities in these residential complexes, townhouses, apartment complexes. They want to understand what it takes. So at this particular time, JPS is actually installing public charging stations that's on, in easily accessible sites. We're also seeing the opportunity also to install these public charging facilities within these types of complexes. That's an option. But if it is that the developer or the owner wants to put EV charging on their own, so the cost for, of usage of the electricity is on their bill, then we are working through those guidelines as well, and there are other stakeholders that would inform that. For example, we'll be talking to the Bureau of Standards of what the type of equipment that would be safe to install in those kind of spaces. We're talking about what are the electrical standards that you need to comply with to be able to put in those facilities as well. So, and of course, there is a commercial aspect, what is the nature of the service, which is where Zara was also alluding to in terms of the regulator supporting that kind of strategy and policy guideline going forward. So the fact is that in this stage of the conversation, people are moving to put in those facilities, waiting for the vehicles to come. And what we as a company, JPS, is actually doing now is that we are working to get those guidelines and bring the stakeholders together to help us to inform the public that they can be guided accordingly. So a lot is happening on all fronts.
I could just add to that individual purchasers will be able to purchase a home charger as well.
That is correct.
So they don't have to rely on the
You don't have to rely on the complex, the public one at the complex, and then you fight over it.
Right.
But you can have your
It
own.
all depends on, of course, the availability of a parking space.
Right.
Right.
Okay. All right. That's it for questions. So I don't know. Are there any final words, or we're moving?
I think we're good.
We're
Thank
moving
you
on. All right. Thank you
Thanks
so
again.
much. Very interesting discussion there. Thank you so much, ladies, for your insight, your input. You shared information on the environmental perspective. We got the health benefits that will come out of going EVs. We have Jackie giving us the excellent good news that EVs are here. Fully electric vehicles are here. We can just go and purchase them. We just need some money, to go and get that done. And we also learned a little bit more about how the marketing from Ethne, how we need to market, EVs to make them a little bit sexier for the females, right, Ethne? Because of course we have different outlook from men. So of course there's a way that you can bring us in and pull us in. Now we've learned a lot from our ladies as it relates to EVs. At this point in time, we want to listen a little bit more to get some insight from a female who is working in the industry. And this person, her name is Janoy Forrester. And we want to get a little word of encouragement from her, because listening to a lady who is working in the industry is going to cause us to be more interested in going in that direction. She's going to tell us a little bit about how she operates in a male-dominated field as a foreman in an auto mechanic setting. Let's hear from Janoy.
Firstly, my name is Janoy Forrester. I'm the workshop controller for ATL Autobahn. The role that I play is I allocate the jobs to the technician and I ensure that the workshop runs smoothly. So in high school, when I went to Jose Marti Technical, we are supposed to be enrolled in a vocation. I have a boy named Janoy, so they thought I was a boy and they put me in auto mechanics. Eventually I got to love the trade, so I pursued it. I went to Jaggers straight after high school, and that's where my career started. Everyone knows that it's a male-dominated field, but it's really for everyone. It's as long as you're passion-driven and it's something that you really set your heart out and it's something that you really want to do. So I will say that I was really passionate about the trade and I really loved cars. Opportunities are here, and as a woman, your potential is limitless. So you can be whatever you want to be, you can do whatever you want to do as long as you're driven and you put your mind to it. What the advice that I will give is that always fight a fair fight. You're always supposed to be consistent and remain resilient, because the sky isn't even the limit, it goes further. Well, I stand my ground and I always ensure that I have facts. I try to show them the plan and that it's always for the greater good. We're supposed to work as a team, so I always try to reinforce that in my team. The only thing I'm afraid of is not meeting the client's expectation.
Well, look at that. She has a boy name. They put her in auto mechanic, and today she is the foreman in a male-dominated setting. I mean, there's a silver lining in every cloud. She's a forewoman. Well, there's a silver lining in every cloud, though, that we know for sure, because what started out as something that probably seemed a little bit odd has now become something that she's totally comfortable with, and we're happy with it, and we're loving it. All right, now, this is the time when we're going to hear from our key speaker for the afternoon. And so I'm going to introduce her to you. As President and CEO of El Paso Electric, Kelly brings more than 30 years of experience in the energy industry throughout the United States, the Caribbean, the United Kingdom, and Latin America. In these various roles, her focus has been to create culture, optimize talent, and develop innovative strategic plans. Before joining El Paso Electric, Ms. Tomlin, a winner of the S&P Platts Global CEO of the Year Award, served as CEO of Intren LLC, a utility service provider operating throughout the United States. Her work experience also includes her role as president and CEO of the Jamaica Public Service Company. She serves as a board member of the El Paso Chamber of Commerce and Edison Electric Institute. Ladies and gentlemen, many of you are familiar with her from a few years ago when she was here in Jamaica, but she's back with us again this evening, and we want to say, I present to you Kelly Tomlin.
Hi, Ruth Lynn. It's so
Hi,
good
Kelly.
to see everybody again. My heart's still there. I'm so excited to talk about this topic. I've always said our industry has had the best words, light, power, energy, and now we have this new word called charge, and I'm so excited about it. Now, my experience is going to be a little different than the other panelists, and I do want to remind everybody that we started on this journey many, many years ago. Doesn't everyone remember the electric car with the charging cord into the JPS building, like 2015 or something? I drove a car that said powered by JPS, which was a Mitsubishi hybrid plug-in. We built our power station at Bogue to have a charge station. So this has been a long journey. So I've been really excited to take that experience and bring it to the U.S., where I have been. Now, Ethne, I've had an electric car since I got here. And I know someone said about the Model 3. A Model 3 goes for $38,000 in the U.S. So I do want to point out that some women, including I and a lot of my friends, do have electric vehicles. And I've had one for years. So I will talk a little bit about that. So I want to start, I don't want to be duplicative or repetitive, so I will try to move quickly, but I think we should all be pretty charged up, and I'll talk a little bit about that, about the EV trends, what the real benefits are. You've already alluded to them. I'll just maybe give a more global perspective, and that this idea, anytime there's new change and new opportunities, it's an opportunity for us to take a real look, where our limits are mentally and how we can really lean into anything new and new opportunities. So why am I excited? There's 4 key things. And Ruth Lynn mentioned I've been in this industry all my life, and these benefits are really near and dear to me. The Edison Electric Institute, which I sit on as a board member now, has declared that electrification is the biggest opportunity since industrialization for economic development. And what I'm excited about, it really gives our customers a chance to lower their overall costs. And what that does for us is be able to grow our industry in a way that benefits the overall customers. And I'm not going to read to you because you can see the slides here. The economy, a lot of new businesses that are springing up, job creations now that will unfortunately replace some of the combustion turbine work that we do today. But the real opportunity right now is the environment, which I'll talk about a little bit, and the utilization of the electric grid. For those of you who work in our industry, we know that we build a grid that is not used sometimes up to 50% of the time, depending on where you live. And EV charging gives us an opportunity to take full benefit of that investment. So just to summarize, low cost of ownership, and at least in the US, environmentally friendly, great performance and convenience. So again, I'm going to have US numbers, and I certainly apologize for that, but I think what's happening in Europe and China and the US will translate throughout the globe soon. It's about half to operate as a gas-powered vehicle, and it depends, of course, on what your energy costs are, but that's what it is here where I live. And the idea or the experience is a little bit different because we do have time of use rates. When I lived in Chicago, I was charging basically free at night, or a penny a kilowatt hour, between the hours of 10 and 4 in the morning. So I would just plug before I went to bed, and my car would charge. And it really took advantage of the grid, and it gave me an opportunity to really have really low energy prices. But the real thing about electric cars, if you haven't driven one, is the fun. My son, who was both poo-pooing, in our case, it was different. I was excited about electric, and they wanted a big, turbo car. When they get in my car now, it does go to 0 to 60, and mine doesn't do less than 2, because that's a car I wouldn't pay for. I think that car costs $100,000, but mine goes to 0 to 60 in about 3, and that's really a lot of fun to drive. So the torque and the rapid acceleration, if you haven't experienced it, it really does give me confidence when I drive in traffic. My board members were following me, and I said, you won't be able to follow me, because they had a traditional car, and I was weaving in and out of traffic. For those of you who don't know, El Paso is on the Mexico border. I can throw a rock to Mexico right now, and it is on the New Mexico border. And we have a huge manufacturing and on the other side of the river in Mexico, and we have the transportation industry, and there's trucks and cars everywhere on Route 10. And what is great about electric cars, I can get in and out of traffic, and I feel very confident. When I rent a car now, I'm nervous because I'm afraid that I don't have the power and the control that I have. I'll just highlight the carbon footprint. A typical passenger vehicle emits about 4.6 metric tons of carbon dioxide. And studies project that if in 2050, every other car on the road would be electric, we reduce global CO2 emissions by 1.5 gigatons a year, which is equivalent of what Russia now currently emits. So it's a huge opportunity, and it's growing. I'm not going to bore you with lots of numbers, but today there's about, at the end of 2020, 10 million, 31,000 trucks. The truck market right now is the real winner in the US. Certainly the F-150, the Rivian, that's really going to change the market. So you can see what's happening, just showing you here the graph of what we expect to happen in China and Europe and other regions, which are leading the EV market. But what we do know is that those markets go first, but other markets follow. A lot of talk I heard today about the enablers. I just wanted to take a minute to point that out. And I see a lot of works going on. Supportive regulatory frameworks. I mentioned AMI meters because that really helps take advantage and helps lower the costs when you can get very low energy prices at night. A lot of incentives and rebates. We are working with both GM and Ford right now, and we've had significant rebates from those retailers, in addition to, of course, tax laws and other laws. Even in my company, we give a rebate for anybody who buys an electric car. Declining battery costs. From the time I bought my Tesla when I left Jamaica in 2017, or my EV, to now, I can't believe the difference in my charging capability and the range. Those are continuing to go down. I heard a conversation. I just want to remind everybody, most new models offer 200 to 500 miles. My car, which is a very middle of the road car, I have both the Tesla Model 3 and the Tesla Model Y. Both of them are under $60,000. And as I said earlier, the Model 3 is low as $38,000, depending on what you get. My Tesla Y is a 300 plus range. And I want to talk a little bit about the optionality of prices. Certainly we have a Leaf and a Bolt, which is on the on sub 30 in a lot of cases, and it goes all the way up to a Jaguar, of course, but a lot of pricing options. I'm surprised at my company, the people who are buying electric are the young people. They are entering the market often with their first series car at electric. So that really is a change in demographic for us. The industry, as I said earlier, but I want to point out, so many industries have declared that they will not build combustion turbines after a certain age, a certain year. And California is starting certain markets are outlawing combustion turbines by a certain year. So a lot happening with the auto manufacturers that I think will drive this change as well. Businesses are choosing. Amazon rules the world, as we know. They're buying electric vehicles, 100,000 Rivians. My husband has had a Rivian on order for like a year and a half. So if they ever do come. And so you can see the big people really playing, which will drive, again, price and availability. The real thing that we see happening now is Uber and Lyft. Lyft agreeing to have 100% EV rides by 2030, and Uber the same, and $800 million US investment to help all drivers switch to EVs. So that's a huge impact on our market. I wanted to show this too. The Model 3, which is a really popular car, and it's Range Plus, and it just some numbers here to show you what they cost and how the price compares to other vehicles. And again, we talked about range anxiety, and I want to point out I never had any other charger but then my normal charge in my house, just your normal plug, and I plugged in my car overnight. When I got here, I did get a Charge 2, which cost me $2,000 to rewire my house, US dollars, but I never had one before. And the global charging stations, at least in the US, are really growing. I don't want to go into that because you've talked about it, but I just wanted to point out some things we can do to have some fun. You know, people are creating EV websites. At our company, we created an EV club, and we have, little events where people get to drive my car, which is always fun for people to drive my cars. We have created a lot of excitement with local dealerships, and somebody said it, everything's marketing. But if people drive the car, and a lot of people see me in a car, and they're not worried about me driving a vehicle, it does say something. We have, and I have, an EV time of use rate at my house, and that's been a great plus. And then an impact study to show how all utilities have to get ready for this, and we're preparing for that now. And we're working on both our own utility-owned charging stations. We are partnering with schools, much like we did in Jamaica for solar and charging station on street lights. That's really exciting right now. And then I wanted to end with maybe the most important part. This idea of any change, whether it's vehicles and any opportunity, and how do we step into it as women to say, this is an emerging market. There's the marketing aspect, there's a technical aspect, there's the car ownership aspect, there's a car selling aspect. How do we really get our information and look at what's happening and say, how do I change my but other opportunities? And you've heard these before, but I love them. If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change. And once your mindset changes, everything on the outside will change along with it. I'm really proud of the journey that we took at JPS. And I still talk about leading a revolution. And I know that we now say powering what matters, but I think they're very consistent, that this revolution or evolution, not just of the way we think about our environment, that we think of how we drive and how we live and how we embrace opportunities, but that is revolutionary. When women stand up and say, I can drive any vehicle and I can make decisions that somehow are ambiguous, that is revolutionary. And once your mindset changes, everything on the outside will change along with it. And so I just wanted to show my happy face in my car here when I got my second Tesla. They do a really good job of marketing, making you feel real special when you get it. And I think that's what any opportunity is all about too, that we participate in, this creating community and creating opportunity for each other. So I wanted to leave you with a thought that I've been thinking about for a long time. This idea of, we've heard and we've all experienced such a year of uncertainty and so divisive in many corners. And our company right now, we're a federal contractor, so we have a vaccine mandate. And we've had to tell people that if you're not vaccinated by December 8th, that your employment may be terminated. We're lucky because we have 85% of our employees that have been vaccinated for a long time, but that still is 15% of our employees who got these letters. And it is a time of great uncertainty. And if we let it, it can be greatly divisive. And I think the call for all of us, whether we're talking about electric vehicles or our industry or our communities or this opportunity, is to create room for everyone and to make sure that we're doing everything to keep our unity in our community. So let other people live small lives, but not you. Let others argue over small, insignificant things, but not you. And let others leave their future in someone else's hands, but not you. So Jamaica, thank you for letting me come back and talk about electric cars. You know, I got the bug in Jamaica. I still have my picture. It says powered by JPS. And I took that to another land, but it's still certainly the seed that made it grow in me. So thank you for that. Thank you for letting me be here. And power on, power up, charge on, charge up. Go on and learn this industry and find your place in it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Round of applause for Kelly Tomlin. And Kelly?
Yes, ma'am.
To remind you, one of your fans
wait,
this for you to look at. For you to recall when you were here hanging out with us. She's gone for hers.
Wait.
Here we go. Match for match. There we go.
Yeah,
all right, Kelly.
Those special to me, man.
Yes, the days when you used to hang out with us. What was that, Kelly?
See the picture behind me?
Oh yes. Oh yes. All your Jamaican things are right there.
Yes, man. We're little but we Hollywood. We're little but we.
All right, Kelly. Thank you so much. Thank you. And of course, you recognize the energy that she brings. She's in charge. She brings a certain level of energy, which she actually got when she came to Jamaica. You know, we gave it to her when she came here. She's half Jamaican now, right? All right, thank you so much. We learned a lot right there. And what it actually told us is that we can purchase an electric car and we'll have fun with it, because Kelly's talking about speed and durability and all kinds of exciting things that she's doing with it. So we're now even more excited to purchase an electric car, right, Audrey? Right. Jackie, do you drive an electric car?
Not yet.
Not yet? But you sell them. You should drive one.
In other words, we couldn't get enough production.
Okay.
So I'd
like you to start driving one around and you brand it EV so that persons will say,
absolutely,
where can I get this to purchase? And
I just need more stock.
All right. And seeing what they did with Kelly, I have an advice for you. When you sell the first car to a female, make a big thing out of it.
Consider it done.
So that, thank you so much.
Consider it done.
All right. It has been a wonderful evening. We've learned a lot. We've shared a lot. We have gotten, we're now, our curiosity is now piqued about a number of things. So I'm hoping that persons will continue the conversation. You will also go and do more research. I'm sure that you will probably go and do research to find out more about EVs. And I'm not sure if we've put any contact information in the chat where if somebody wants to ask a question later on, Audrey, maybe anyone else can just put a contact there that they may make contact with us if they want more information so that we can talk with them. They can email us at calljps@jpsco.com. All right. That's where you can write us so that the emails will pass on to us so that we can actually share more information with you. But it has been a fabulous evening. I enjoyed myself. I think everybody else did as well. I learned a lot. I'm now hyped up and ready to abandon the vehicle that I have and get myself an EV. So I'll be coming down to Jackie for her to tell me how we can do this. And I'm looking forward to seeing other people lined up behind me when I'm there. So let's do this. Let's go EV. Let's find out more about it, become even more excited than we are this evening. Let's go green, charge up.
Break the barrier.
And break the barrier.
Break the barrier.
And when people see us on the street, especially us girls, they'll say, boy, she's in charge. Have a good evening, people.